Well, now we're going to be joined by Ralph Schuman, author of Hidden History of Zionism. Mr. Schuman, thank you for joining us on World News. Now, with Israel having great ties and influence with the U.S., is it in the best interest of the free world to upgrade its ties for the European Organization for Nuclear Research?
Well, let me first of all say that the category of free world is one that's certainly alien to my understanding. I think what you're talking about is the propaganda of the United States ruling class about the imperialist agenda that it has. And it's not unlike the pretense that Israel is a besieged democracy that needs to have a monopoly of nuclear power, when in fact the nuclear capacity of the Israeli state has always been used as a dagger in the heart of the Arab movement, of in fact the regional movement for national self-determination. I can tell you from my own personal experience, having met with Shimon Peres when he was the defense minister, meeting with Ben Gurion as well in 1962, as part of a negotiation I was conducting involving Gamal Abdel Nasser, Abdel Karim Qasim of Iraq, even King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, and Saab Salem in Lebanon. And the Zionist leadership had the faintest interest in any such discussions whatsoever. As Saab Salem said to me at the time, they're too busy planning the occupation of Kuwait. And the relevance of this is that I addressed the operations in Dimona with Shimon Peres, who acknowledged them and said they were vital for the further subsistence of the Israeli state and for its capacity to intimidate the Arab countries. Well, they're not ambiguous about this, and you're talking about hundreds of nuclear warheads. In fact, if you recall, the nuclear physicist, or rather the nuclear worker, Mordecai Vanunu, who had been working in Dimona and who exposed in the Sunday Times of London at the time, the scale of nuclear capacity and aggressive intent on the part of the Israeli state, was kidnapped by the Israelis and held in solitary confinement for almost 18 years. The record of Israeli deployment of the nuclear capacity it has, involving hundreds of hydrogen bomb-capable missiles, integrated with the United States, constantly upgrading its capacity, linking it to offensive missiles, represents a threat to all of the peoples of the region. No ambiguity about that. And all that you have here with CERN is a formal enhancement of the legitimacy of the Israeli state's menace to the peoples of the region and indeed of the world.
Well, Mr. Schuman, you made a good point about Israel having the power to oppress and nuclear warheads and such forth. Is also known that Israel is continuing to oppress the Palestinians. Do they really need to have also the strength of nuclear power in this situation?
Well, the purpose of the nuclear capacity, because let's be very clear that repeatedly major officials of the Israeli state, and from Golda Meir on, have spoken about the pending Holocaust. They invoke the Holocaust, the irony of which is that the Zionist movement and leadership collaborated with all of the most anti-Semitic regimes, including the Nazis, as I've often discussed, as I've documented in the Hidden History of Zionism. The relevance of this, of course, is that the invocation of the Holocaust, wrapping themselves in the shroud of the 6 million victims of German fascism, of Nazism, all the while that they were colluding with that very force, are designed to provide a patina of legitimacy to their aggressive intent, because the second Holocaust of which they speak is the putative aggression of the Arab states who they claim are going to wipe out the Jews. The shoe is on the other foot. The Zionist state was formed by the massacre of Palestinians from one end of the country to the other, and the driving out of 850,000 people out of a population of little over 970,000. This is the origin and nature of the Zionist state, and the nuclear capacity is designed to terrorize the regional populations and the countries who are the governments of these countries with the prospect of a preemptive or a nuclear strike by the Israeli state. They've always declared their readiness to do this. They menace the countries of the world with this capacity. In this regard, they are supported and clandestinely facilitated by U.S. military, and now the European CERN is only adding a patina of legitimacy to the facts on the ground. facts on the ground is that the Israeli monopoly of nuclear capacity in the region is a threat to the survival of the peoples of the world, because it represents the prospect of a nuclear holocaust initiated by the Israelis against the peoples of the region, with all of the deathly consequences that represent. And by the way, one final point about the irony of the role of CERN. Israeli academics and officials associated with the Mossad have spoken often about Israel's capacity to take nuclear action against European cities as a deterrent or as a threat against Europe's support of the aspirations of the Palestinian people, or of any of the aspirations of the regional peoples of the world to throw off the chains of imperialism and subjugation. That's the real reality on the ground. And this is part of an attempt to stabilize the threat to these peoples, namely the Israeli state, and it should be exposed for exactly what it is.
Well, Mr. Schoenman, thank you very much. We always appreciate your input and analysis right here on Press TV's World News. That was Ralph Schoenman joining us on Skype, author of Hidden History of Zionism.